Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Jim. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Is really different. This today is a really important session for us around staying safe. And so we are going to be looking at things like domestic violence and abuse and housing. And also we have Stefan from THT Direct, who's going to kind of wrap up with looking at a number of issues that have been coming through to THT Direct. What we want to acknowledge, particularly around the issues around domestic abuse and violence, is that there are many people who may be impacted by that who are not able to join this call at all today because of the situations which they are in. So we would ask that if you are not impacted today, that you take the information that we are going to present and you're able to cascade and to share that with others who may be in precarious or unsafe situations. Throughout the chat, we'll be populating throughout the webinar, we'll be populating the chat function with resources and information and links that our speakers have very, very kindly pulled together for us. At the end of the webinar, if you would like the list that we pull together, we'll give you an email address. You can email me and we'll send it to you directly. So we'll be publicising the events over the final event from tomorrow at the weekend, so look out for that for the Zoom registrations. So before I introduce our speakers, just to bring you up to speed with the format and how we're going to run this afternoon. Each speaker will have approximately 10 minutes to deliver their presentation. And we would ask that during that time, you treat this like you would a real face-to-face in the real world group. So be respectful of our speakers, be respectful of each other. As Jim has said, we've put everybody on mute. So that enables us to have the presenters speak freely without us all talking over each other. But please do put your comments or questions or suggestions into the chat area. At the end of those, we'll go over to Dominic, who will be collating and looking at your questions or comments, and we'll just be bringing those back to the speakers. We accept that there could be a lot of stuff that comes out of this, so if we don't get to answer your question today, please forgive us, but we will certainly try to find a way to do so. And if other people have the answer, please feel free to populate that, put that into the comment section as well. We're due to run for approximately an hour. If we run over a little bit, please bear with us, because that just means we're having a really, really good conversation. So, thank you all once again for joining. Before I hand over to first of our speakers, I just wanted to introduce them, and we're going to have a quick question to them each. So we have Sophie Strachan, who is from the Sophia Forum. Hey, Sophie. And she's going to be talking about domestic abuse and violence and staying safe. Then we have Carla, who is from the Outside Project, and she's going to be talking to us today about housing and staying safe and the various housing options that might be available to people. And finally, we have Stefan from THT Direct, and Stefan is here today, and Stefan has gone away and he's looked at some of the key issues that are coming up on the Terrence Higgins Trust helpline and some of the solutions that they've been putting out to people and advice. So welcome one and all. Just to kick off and kind of like get us all into the room, so to speak, I'm going to ask each of our presenters just how's COVID has been affected or impacted on them. And I'll go to you first, Sophie. So do you want to just tell us, Sophie, how has COVID been impacting on you?
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to see those and to have those who I can't see on the webinar. My working hours have changed. I've been redeployed and I'm currently working at the Nightingale. So I've kind of got increased hours, but less working days. And I'm now doing nights for the first time in about 20 years. And I guess psychologically, how this is currently affecting me, my reality right now is that I'm seeing a lot of deaths. So, you know, that's not something that I'm exposed to normally. So there's kind of the processing of that, and just really we cannot escape COVID right now. It's everywhere. And I normally work in an NHS setting, so it's just everywhere, every day. What I'm having out of this current kind of experience is just a real highlighted level of the importance of self-care and immense gratitude, really. And I'm kind of answering some questions that I was sent. So I guess finally, I I guess just something that I'm doing more of is walking. In terms of my exercise, I'm doing a lot more walking just to kind of help that psychological and emotional well-being. But thank you for inviting me to be here today.
Thank you, Sophie. And just a quick one on that. Last week we did a lot of physical well-being, and so we can send out, we have a number of links in our resource list. If you want that, email us, and there's some good tips on looking after your well-being. Carla, over to you. What impact has COVID-19 and the lockdown had on you?
I think, I mean, as our services quite physically flipped upside down, the community centre has closed and the night shelter has become 24 hours. So it's a really different way of working for us and the team. Our contact with the community is happened to be through things like WhatsApp, just getting people up to speed on things like Zoom, making sure that they have tech, making sure that we have tech. It was a huge change for us as a project. And I think as a team, we're used to working quite quickly on campaigns. But I think that working on a campaign that's completely come out of nowhere, just totally unexpectedly, I think that's been really difficult. I guess we were gearing up to our Pride campaign. That's the time of year that we were in. So obviously, and it does feel a little bit like I'm walking through the fog, shouting at people, and getting kind of strange responses that send me off in a different direction. So it does seem a little bit chaotic, to be honest, the response within the homelessness sector, which has left me really shocked. And I guess it's also kind of given me a lot of, I tend to have that where, if I get really quite upset or angry about something, it kind of motivates me and pushes me forward to try and change something. So I guess that's where we're at. We're sort of the development of the project, is just sped right up, to increase in our capacity or pushing for more accommodation and emergency accommodation. So yeah, so a lot more work, and I guess I'm having to take a moment to sort of recognise that we're not going to be able to change this whole sector and the provision within it overnight, to respond effectively to what's happening. And it's a real shame. I'm just like trying to take time out. I can't work 24 hours a day, and I've started running. I haven't been running for ages, so that's like a new thing that I've been doing. Is jogging and joining in with the recovery groups and things like that, which I hadn't really been doing before.
Cool. Thank you. So some good self-care there. Great. And Stefan, finally to you, how's COVID impacted on you? Have you started a new routine? Have you done something different? What's going on?
Okay, so for those who don't know me, I'm with THT Direct with the helpline since 2003, and historically the helpline was always run from the office. So 6 weeks ago, we got the message, you got to leave the office and you run the service from home. And with that, a lot of things changed. So we're a small team. We have 4 staff members. We have 15 volunteers. And all of a sudden, we found ourselves in the situation where the problem solving, the support, the information is all happening from within our own walls and within our home setting. And it had a huge impact on some of the staff members, I have to say, and to some extent volunteers, because all of a sudden we didn't have the peer support anymore that we had in the office. So we had to do it from home, and to set that service up within days and make it run, because the numbers of calls and inquiries, they were just going up through the roof. It was not easy. Okay. How has it affected me? I think I'm ever more than grateful for the role I'm doing, because a lot more people living with HIV contact us than ever before, certainly compared to recent years. And to make that difference actually motivates me to work every day from 9 to 6 in the evening. And I think what I realize, or what I became to realize, is also that this is not over just in 2 months. I think, and I touch on it later, this is probably going on for some time. and how we support our own community, how we stay mentally safe, how we design our support system that people need even more than ever is becoming a huge challenge.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all three for sharing that and your own personal experiences. So just before I hand over to Sophie, just a little bit of context. So when we were pulling together these sessions and Jim and I were kind of brainstorming what we wanted to talk about, it became really apparent to us really early on that we needed to talk about safety for people living with HIV. And we know that in our regular lives, in a normal world, pre-COVID-19, that we are, as a community and individuals, more susceptible and more vulnerable to things like unsafe housing situations, intimate partner violence, domestic abuse, a whole range of issues, many times exacerbated by HIV stigma. And we recognise that in lockdown, that could be made even worse. And I think this has been bared out by the increasing, shocking numbers of domestic violence cases, calls to helplines, issues around homelessness, etc. I've spoken to 1 or 2 colleagues at different helplines to find out what's going on for them. And people with HIV seem to have grasped the COVID information, but all of the other stuff that we experience in our day-to-day lives may not be addressed. So this is why we want to do this. I'm going to hand over to Sophie, who's going to talk about a particular area. Again, we recognise that this is a sensitive, touchy subject for many people. Please take care of yourselves. If we are going to put lots of information, lots of helplines as well. Before I hand over, Jim is just going to do a quick poll. Jim.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, so just going to bring up a quick poll, which we'd really like everyone to just give a quick yes or no answer to. So here we go. So that's launched. So if you can vote, please.
Okay.
Okay. So has COVID-19 and the lockdown left you feeling more vulnerable? So about 60% have said yes, and about 40% have said no. So I think, again, as Mark said, we really, let me just close that down. Yeah, we just want to, we want to acknowledge that, many people living with HIV will be feeling more vulnerable at the moment. And that's going to be for lots of different reasons. So I think what we really hope is, during this session and as a result of this session, you feel more supported and also, or at least are able to know where to go and get, further support and information. So I'll hand over to Sophie. Over to you.
My name's Sophie. I am the current director of the Sophia Forum. I also work at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital as a health advisor, and within that role I work as a domestic abuse link. So in terms of the current situation and self-isolation, this is going to mean different things for different people, and in the context of people living with HIV, there are some who will have been put into the shielding process and those that haven't. And I think for those who are in the shielding process who may also be experiencing domestic abuse, they may feel even less able to access support because they have been told by our government basically that they are being shielded. And the backlash of this is that they are ending up being in a space where the person that they are living with is with them more. And a lot of survivors of people who are experiencing domestic violence can use, for those who are working, work can be a way of separation from the perpetrator. And so there may be some who have been put on furlough, those who aren't working, but fundamentally this whole situation has thrown people together in a way that they haven't been before. So as Mark said, our focus today is on how to stay safe. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to be putting up a lot of links in ways that you can access advocacy support. And I just want to keep stressing that even though services are reduced, some of them, significantly, on here are a load of links that will take you to organisations that are still providing services, albeit that potentially reduced services. And I also want to say that there isn't a gender specific focus in my presentation. This is for anybody, regardless of their gender or sexual orientation, that can access these services. There is workers called independent domestic violence advisors, and some people may not have heard of them. They are based in hospital settings, and they support people who are subjected to domestic abuse. Again, I've attached a link here. One of the important things that people can use during this period is to develop a safety plan. Now, for some people, they may already have that in place, but for some, this current situation may be the first time that they are starting to experience some form of abuse. And for those who may not be clear on what domestic abuse or how domestic abuse can present itself, it can present in forms of economic abuse, where either partner may use the withholding of money as a form of control. It may result in intimidation, coercion. It could be that part of the usual behaviour that the perpetrator is exerting on the other person could be that to stop them from seeing friends, stop them from speaking to family or accessing activities, and that may well be even more enforced right now. So part of the safety plan is about identifying people that you can go to virtually or via the phone that can support you through this period. It could be that you have children, so this is about protecting yourself but also your children. It helps to plan in advance of the possibility of any future violence. Domestic abuse doesn't always constitute solely physical violence. For some, there is sexual violence. It's also that for some people who may still be going out, there is reporting that sexual assaults, stranger sexual assaults, are still occurring, even though there was an initial reduction in the reporting of that. They are still occurring. I want to stress now, and I will stress again, that the police are there for you to be able to support. It may be that accident and emergency is your place of safety. And I know that there are concerns for people in going to A&E because of COVID. But if that is your place of safety, then we would say for you still to go to your place of safety and to access support. As it says here, it's thinking about how you can increase your safety, either within the relationship or if you decide to leave. And there are some key questions here for you to consider. All of this safety planning is available via the links that I have put on this slide, but also to the ones that I've sent to Marc ahead of this presentation, so they can all be accessed beyond this. Oh. Sorry. So there are a lot of people who may not be aware of something called silent solutions. And if you are calling the police, or if you manage to call the police in a moment of what could be violence taking place, and you happen to have your phone on you, there is something called silent solutions. When you call 999, as it says here, and the operator will ask you which service you require. If you don't respond, the call will be put through to silent solutions, and then you press 55, and that will automatically go through to the police. Again, there is a resource at the bottom here that tells you more about that. And as I said earlier, your place of safety may well be your local accident and emergency, and you can still attend here if you feel at risk. It's remembering that regardless of whatever else is going on, your safety is of paramount importance. Again, the suggestions is trying to maintain those links with those around you. If you are in employment and you're able to set up with your employer a daily check-in as a way of supporting yourself, it's determining with your manager or with your colleague an excuse as to why they need to call you. And it will just be a way of you being able to check in with somebody outside of the household. And also in your safety planning is, if that person cannot get hold of you, what should they do? It may be that you have, if you don't have an IDVA, that you might have a social worker. You might have a probationary worker. You might have a mental health worker. It's about contacting people and putting in place support with those that you feel safe with. And as it says at the bottom, if it is about just trying to remove yourself from the perpetrator whilst you're in the same house, pretend that you're feeling unwell, just so you can remove yourself into the other room, even if that is about sitting in the bathroom for 15 minutes. And I think the key points to remember is that you're not alone in this, even though being in your household can feel incredibly isolating and very difficult if you are living with the perpetrator. It's not to forget that if this is something that you have been going through pre-COVID, there is knowledge and there are tools that you have already developed and have that you can continue to use, even though this is an enforced isolation. And the abuse is not your fault. It's very common for us to internalize it and believe that it must be something that we're doing, and it's not. And as I said earlier, do not let the COVID-19 restrictions stop you from seeking safety and refuge. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Sophie. That was really comprehensive, some really useful, valuable information in there. I hope people found it useful. Dominic, over to you. Have we got any questions come in?
So we've got a number of comments from G-Day talking about being vulnerable also depends on your social location and context before lockdown and during lockdown. So he's also saying, let's talk about those who are migrants with no access to funds and support. What can you do in the case of emotional bullying in a shared household? And then he's also just picked up the fact that information shared today is UK specific, but he's noted that some folks are calling from outside the UK. So whether we have any resources that could be useful for people who are dialing in internationally.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Sophie, I mean, let's just come back to you real quickly. Is there anything in addition you can say around emotional bullying in a shared household? I mean, you talked about removing yourself to another space. Is there any other advice or information that you might be able to offer for that particular question?
I think you're thank you, Jide, and they're very important points. And I think you could still use the same safety planning in terms of what would be exit strategies if you are stuck in a shared household. And And it could be that you still speak to some of the agencies that we have put up here, because bullying is a form of intimidation and that is a form of abuse. And so that person's, what would be a normal safe space has become unsafe. So I wouldn't, I'm not saying that you are minimising or making it any different, but I believe that all the tools that are up here today would be supportive of somebody who is experiencing bullying from a housemate.
Sorry.
And I would say beyond the UK, and I had noticed that, I'm sure that after this we could resource some resources and maybe put that up, you know, when this webinar goes up in the coming days.
Thank you, Sophie. I mean, thank you for that. Thank you for your point, Jide. Just to acknowledge to our friends who are on the call from outside of the UK, this was developed as for a UK audience, but we are so glad that you are here today. And as Sophie has said, we can look at sourcing a couple of pieces of information. And if others do know of services in countries outside of the UK, please pop them in the chat for us now. All right, thank you very much, Sophie, for that. We will share your slides and we will also include all of that information, those really useful links in our resource list, which will be available at the end of this webinar. So now I'm going to hand over to Carla, who's going to talk about housing and housing issues. Over to you, Carla.
Hello. So I'm Carla, I'm the director for the Outside Project. And the Outside Project's the UK's first LGBTIQ+ community shelter and centre. We recognise that there have been many spaces that the community have self-organised through squats and communes over time here in the UK. But this is the first one that has been really supported by the system, as it were. So we're funded by the Mayor of London, and they've given us the fire station in Clerkenwell in central London to run our project. So we have a 10-bed shelter, and we also run a community centre, and we have hubs across downstairs and in Camden, and we work in partnership with Stonewall Housing, who run hubs across London to be able to reach people who, members of our community who are at risk of homelessness. So yeah, this is how we started. This is our team. So yeah, just friends that worked in the sector, people who had lived experience of homelessness. So that's kind of where we come from. So lived experience has always been a valued part of the charitable sector, but you don't often find people who have lived experience themselves actually leading and developing on a project in this way and of this size. So we're really proud of where we've come from and the fact that people have supported us to do this. And by people, we mean the community. So Meth, Shay, Georges Michael, anyone who baked cakes for us to sell at Prides and invited us down at local Prides to shake buckets. That's really how we began in making our project. And so it's been a real kind of community effort. This was always our mission, in providing a safe space, developing relationships with people, trying to bridge the gap between our community and the homelessness sector, because most of us had worked in the sector and could see that it wasn't felt to be a safe space, not just by us, but by other people that we had worked with. So we realised that we needed to do our own thing and try and grow into a full-time service, which is where we're at now. When we began, we were just on this tour bus, and that's what we crowdfunded for. So we've literally gone from this tour bus through to having our own massive fire station. So it's really grown over the past couple of years, what we do. All of our guests identify as LGBTIQ+. We get a lot of feedback about that. There definitely are straight shelters, in that many shelters are not felt to be welcome by our community, and that's a structural problem. It's not the burden of us as oppressed people to kind of constantly have to justify our right to safe spaces, especially ones that we have created, through shaking buckets and making cakes. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at the moment. I'd say the work that we do is really kind of down here on the Maslow scale of needs. It's just like providing a safe space for people to come to, where they feel supported by the community around them, physically safe, people who are fleeing domestic violence, abuse in the home. These are the top 3 reasons that local council give for homelessness is parents and friends being unwilling or unable to continue to accommodate, relationship breakdown, or a loss of a assured short-hold tenancy. We see that a lot more within our community, with parents just rejecting their children, rejecting their families at the moment that they've come out. So we hear about that a lot. And I think that it is a unique experience of our community, having that experience. So predominantly with younger people. So the younger people that we'll have in the shelter, they'll have had no expectation that they were going to be made homeless. It would just happen instantly. Similar with relationship breakdown and domestic abuse, there's higher rates of that amongst our community, with less support services and networks around. So less safety nets. We're not as linked in as other minorities or communities. So yeah, I think we're at higher risk than our cisgender heterosexual peers, but with a lot less structure to support us when things go really wrong. So yeah, so the structural causes of homelessness, they just affect us a lot more. And then you have additional things like hate crime as well, that affect us at higher rates. So there is a need for a service that the term that we use is an identity responsive service. So our service responds to the identity of people. You'll have gender responsive services and culturally responsive services. But for us, this is something that we recognize that we need, that is quite unique. But yeah, so I'm just going to show you a few things that we've done during COVID. As I said at the beginning, our community centre had to close. I recognise I've only got a few minutes, so I'll try and show you as much as I can. But so the first thing we did is to try and keep connected to our community, and you can find us on Facebook. We've set up the London LGBTIQ+ COVID-19 mutual aid group. Within that, you can request support. So you can fill out one of these mutual aid forms. It's just a quick form. Just let us know what it is that you need. And one of our volunteers will be able to support you. So that's that. I mean, the reason that we did that is we recognise that some people didn't feel safe in their neighbourhoods. It's something that we know. There's house proud research on it. So we recognise that people would feel more comfortable reaching out to other LGBT people, even if they were a few streets away, rather than the person next door who might have given them a funny look in the past. So yeah, that's our mutual aid group, and it's just been great for the community to be able to share fun things to do and ideas. We've kind of banned the news in this group because it's just too dark. So yeah, you can join us online there. We also set up a virtual community centre, so we could continue to run our groups. We have various things happening throughout the week, like pretty much every day there's something happening that you can join us on. On a Friday we have the Queer House Party. I think last Friday we had over like 1,500 people join us, just to dance and have a good time with their friends. So that connection that they have, that they really deeply miss, was something that we recognised. It was the first Friday actually of lockdown. We recognised that we needed to do something like that. So quite luckily we've got Harry Gay on our team, and he's a DJ. So we also set up different other things that we've set up. So the Death Cafe, that's something new. That's going to start this Sunday. So that's a space for LGBTIQ+ people, their friends, their families to come together and talk about death. And that's something that we recognised that was needed through the socials that we run in the virtual community centre. We're also doing a lot of campaigning work. So you'll see through our social media, you'll have people holding up these signs, make space for homeless queers. So doing a lot of campaigning at the moment to try and get more emergency accommodation open for the community. So yeah, that's what we've been up to. If you need help, you can get in touch with us. You can refer yourself to us through Stonewall Housing. As I say, they're our partners. This is their referral form. And just kind of halfway down, it'll say like what your housing situation is. And you can ask there to be referred directly to the Outside Project if you know our service and this is where you want to be. But it's good to have a chat with them. Their helpline is at the top there. So have a chat with them. Or check out Shelter as well. Shelter's got a really good page around COVID-19 and the services that are needed. This is the, yeah, you can, I think that those two, Shelter and Stonewall Housing, are probably the best places for you to go to get advice through a helpline, or if you wanted to read different advice that's available to you there. And I think that's my time. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Carla. Okay, thank you very much for that. Really useful, really informative stuff. Dominic, over to you. Any questions?
So we have a comment which says, COVID-19 has exposed many queer people of colour to homelessness, and more so people living with HIV. Some cases of forced HIV disclosure have left a few more vulnerable, facing stigma and anxieties. Is there a specific support we can access or create?
Okay, thank you. So Carla, so I'm going to kind of, thank you for that question. I had to read it before. I suppose the question then is that Outside Project speaks to and services LGBTQI communities, and you've also mentioned Stonewall and possibly Shelter. And we know that there are lots of people who are living with HIV who are heterosexual, who aren't gay or bi. Where can you suggest that they go to for support right now if they find themselves in a challenging or precarious housing situation? Is that just Shelter, or is there anywhere else?
I mean, I would go to Shelter first. I mean, everyone should be given. Everyone can make a homelessness application to their local authority, and that would be the first place to start. I mean, you would come to us or Stonewall Housing if you're LGBTIQ+, but yeah, otherwise you would speak to your local authority.
Local authority or Shelter. Okay, and then the second question I've got is. People may not. There's some stuff I've been reading around landlords and breaks in rent, and people being furloughed and not being able to pay that. Do you have any advice or information, or where people might be able to go to seek advice and information for that issue?
Yeah, London Renters Union are doing a great campaign. So yeah, I mean, wherever you are in the UK, it's always good looking at their page to see what actions they're taking, and they will be able to direct you to renters unions that are local to you. But again, there are government, there has been things put in place to stop evictions. So there are things that you can negotiate with your landlord if you find yourself destitute at this point, but no one should be evicted during lockdown.
All right, thank you so much for that. So once again, we will post information and resources and the links that you've suggested here. Jide has just made a really important point around age restrictions in some of the services that we've mentioned. So we will make a concerted effort to find a couple more organisations that work for older people. I'm thinking of Age UK and Open Doors, so we'll put those on our resource list. And again, friends from outside of the UK, this is we had framed this as a UK conversation. We welcome you. We don't necessarily have advice for housing outside of the UK, but if people have information, please send that to me and I can add it to a resource list. All right, so I'm conscious of time and we still have one more speaker to get through. Jim, we don't have any more polls, no?
No, it was just the one poll today.
Just the one, nice one. All right, so we're going to hand over to the lovely Stefan from THT Direct. Stefan, over to you.
Hello. So I don't have a presentation. I think I just talk about the last 5 weeks, what the calls were about, what we learned, and maybe what we should consider looking forward to COVID maybe lasting a bit longer than expected. So I can honestly say we were not prepared for that. And the first flux of calls, they were really all about, what does it mean for us living with HIV? What does shielding mean? What does social distancing mean? And where do we stand in this? Because we are this non-talked about community, and there is all this information about other people with their health conditions. But what about people living with HIV? And the difficulty for us was that the information changed from day to day. So it was based on CD4 count in an undetectable viral load, but where it started with a CD4 count of 350, eventually it got dropped down to 200. And the recommendation was, if you have a CD4 count of 200 and more and no underlying condition, then you are okay. Well, life is not as simple as that, because we know that people living with HIV and people living with HIV for a very long time, they might have other underlying health conditions. And I think we had to really learn, when people called us, that we don't read just from the textbook. What we had to do is we had to tailor the conversation on the individual situation. So we did ask, how old are you? Did you have pneumonia in the past? What was, you know, when have you been diagnosed? And how has it been so far? And it was a steep learning curve. It then got more and more difficult, because obviously letters and texts went out to people who were not meant to get texts. And that created another wave of fear and anxiety for people living with HIV, because they thought, so we are vulnerable. You just told us we're not. We just were led to believe we're supposed to be okay to deal with it. So how do we respond to those letters? How do we respond to those texts? Is it legally binding? What does it mean for us as an individual? And it was very difficult to navigate, because we wanted to help and we wanted to empower people living with HIV. But like I said, you know, if somebody is living for HIV for 20 plus years and they have a long history of health complications, then clearly you can't just say, yes, it's fine. You know, you pack your shopping bag and you go to Sainsbury's and queue with everyone else, because that's what you're supposed to do. So we literally gave tips around shopping, around daily tasks, and kind of tried to support as good as we could. It then went on to employment questions. And I think as from the second week into lockdown, when then furlough was discussed and when people were confronted with work issues, then the whole atmosphere shifted. We talked to carers who worked for agencies, who never disclosed to their employer and felt forced to disclose about their status, because the manager said to them, well, occupational health says you have a health condition. I'm, as your manager, I have a right to know what your health condition is. You're a key worker, and if you don't tell me about it, then you will be expelled from your job. So there was a lot of fear and worry from people in key worker positions. And we completely underestimated how many people living with HIV actually providing those jobs, whether it's carers, whether it's nurses, whether it's bus drivers, whether it was flight attendants who were forced to go on those rescue flights. And they said, well, hold on, I'm not sure. I'm in that close proximity with people from abroad. Some of them might have COVID. You know, we have flights back from the United States. Their restrictions are not as tight as ours. How do I cope with that? So that all came about in the second week. Now, I have to say, to our rescue was our advice team. Small as it is, in a very short period of time, they adapted their advice to employment rights, to look at furlough rights and working rights. And we gradually were able to make referrals, but a lot of conversations, they were really based on a one-to-one situation where we had fake conversations or kind of role plays with our callers, where we said, okay, so if your manager is coming in that manner, then maybe you should consider that. Maybe you should talk about or open a sentence or conversation like that, and gave them practical advice over the phone how to have those difficult situations with management and with their employers. What I also noticed, and what the team noticed, is really how vulnerable people living with HIV are in the context that this is a new viral infection, and it reminds many people, especially people again living with HIV for a very long time, how it was in the early days. So here they found themselves isolated again. Here they found themselves again with not much information, with very little guidance. And a lot of people said, you know, you can talk about shielding, you can talk about social distancing. We shield anyway, because that's what we feel is right for us to do in this moment, because our health is not looking that great. And with that comes isolation. And I think a lot of people living with HIV live a very isolated life anyway. We don't talk about it much because we all think they should get on fine with their life, you know, and it's easy manageable, but it isn't. And we had conversations sometimes up to an hour where people really expressed their depression, how they live an isolated life, how they couldn't even ask somebody for help getting their shopping done, how they were living on the breadline, how they could not even get out there and be the early ones in the supermarket, because with the limited budget they have in terms of the food they can buy and how they have to budget with other costs, there's a real need in terms of financial support, and it's becoming harder and harder. We had calls about people worrying about their medication. The prescription were coming to an end, and they tried to get hold of the HIV clinics. The numbers were constantly busy. They couldn't get in touch with the clinics. They started panicking, and they said, well, you know, you talk about a viral load and the CD4 count, and you say we should be fine, but if we haven't got our medication, we're not fine, because then we're in danger, you know, of the CD4 count not being that strong and the viral load going up again. So people from abroad who got stuck in the UK said, well, actually, I've got a week left now. I'm living here with my sister. I have no proof of residency. What do I do next? Where do I get my medication? Can I go to any hospital? But then I shouldn't go to the hospital because they say don't turn up. Can I go to A&E? And what if they push me away because I'm not a British national? So again, we had to find out what hospitals within certain areas are providing support. If you're in London, it's maybe a little bit easier. If you're more in a local or rural area, and we talk about, you know, the Midlands, we talk about some places in Essex where people couldn't travel to the clinic into London. It was a real difficulty to find clinics for them who would be able to provide a service for them in a short period of time. Sometimes people had only 2 or 3 days medication left, and they were too scared to contact us earlier. So I think all in all, it has been a steep learning curve, and I'm aware of the time, but what we can offer is limited, I know that. But we have an advice team who is able to advise on employment, on housing issues, and other legal issues that might come up. So people can contact the helpline. We make a referral immediately, and we still have a very good responding time because it's only 2 working days. Compared to other services at the moment, that's not bad. So people can contact us. One other thing, I'm aware that there is a need for financial support, and the hardship fund that existed, over the years, it dried out a little bit, and the criteria was very strict for people who wanted to apply because there was very low funding. But we have changed now the criteria again, and there is additional funding that we did get. So in a way, that's also helpful. Last but not least, the digital services that everybody ranted about in the past, and everybody said, why digital services when there's face-to-face and we should provide face-to-face? I think they have become more relevant than ever. We never would have thought we would say that. So whether that is now online counseling, whether that is My HIV, so now we actually refer to those services, and people they're grateful to have it, because there was a woman who got diagnosed last week, and she said, you know, I have a CD4 count of 50. She said, I can't even go out. I can't do anything. I have to stay in. I can't even access a support group. Is there anything there for me? So step by step, we build on those services that we looked in a funny way in the past. We try to be there. We try to give an ear to the people who call us. And I think that's all we can do at the moment. So over to questions. Maybe.
Okay, thank you. I don't think we've got many questions come in. People have been populating lots and lots of stuff around various places where people can get online support. Lots of great comments, etc., about Food Chain Positive UK, Spectra. So again, we'll cut and paste and we'll put all of this into our resource document. We've got a few minutes left. Stefan, I just wanted to kind of pick up on just a couple of quick points. You mentioned disclosure, and people, particularly those who might be working in social or healthcare, and I've heard this from Positively UK as well. Is there any advice that you can give to people who may be on the webinar now, or they can cascade to friends, to people who are living with HIV who feel that they need to disclose because they're in that situation you described? Do they have to disclose? Should they? Is there any advice that you can give right now?
Okay, so I'm aware that disclosure is a very individual thing, and it doesn't sit well with a lot of people because it's very private. And the idea is that if you disclose your status, then you gain rights under the Disability Discrimination Act.
Right.
So if you ask for reasonable adjustments, no employer should discriminate against you. That's in an ideal world. Sometimes people find themselves working in smaller companies, and obviously the way it's dealt with is not always that understanding.
Right.
And I think that comes then the fear that people think I rather not disclose, or they say the company that I work for is so small, everybody knows everyone's business, and so far I managed, you know, to keep it to myself, and I really feel very vulnerable. But I think it is a decision that everybody has to make on the basis, are they comfortable doing it? Are they feel positive gaining something from it? By law they are. And I think sometimes that's at a moment like this, where you know, where people get sent into working short time, where people lose their job, I think the most important thing really is that you keep your work and that you keep your income, because, you know, that's your livelihood. Mm-hmm. So we would encourage people to disclose, but we never push people into a decision that they're uncomfortable with, and we would discuss all the hurdles that might be in the way why they wouldn't want to do that.
Okay, cool, thank you. And Sophie's just popped in that the National AIDS Trust has great resources supporting people and employers around rights and equality when talking about their HIV. And Monica has also said, disclosure from my point of view, from my experience of speaking to patients in the clinic, is when they're ready and comfortable to do so. And I echo that as well, but just recognising that these are, as we already know, strange and unusual times. So we are now at 4:02, so we are about to wrap up. Thank you all to our speakers today. You've done a fabulous job. You've given us some really, really useful information. Jim, back to you real quickly. Do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of THT's Living Well services, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So I think, as Stefan said, you know, we're offering quite a lot of online support and services. Well, most of our support and services is online at the moment, for obvious reasons. But we've got a online counselling service which is up and running. We've got peer support, various different groups and events, including ones like this, which are available. We've got My HIV, which is our digital peer support platform. Of course, we've got THT Direct, which is our helpline. If you go to the THT website, we have a new section there called THT at Home, which basically brings together all of our sort of online services kind of in one place. So have a look at that. I think I also just kind of wanted to say, as we're coming to the end, that I think we all realise that there's so much that we kind of don't really have control over at the moment in this situation. And I hope some of the guidance and resources that have been shared with you today have been useful. But we're living in very challenging times. The world is feeling a lot less kind to us at the moment, and I think it's just really important that we try to be kind to ourselves, and focus on those things, even just the small things that we do have control over. I think we kind of picked up on this last week at the session around sort of emotional and physical well-being. There are things that we can do, that we do have control over, whether that's just in terms of trying to stay positive as much as we can, trying to avoid, watching too much news and accessing too much social media, or being selective about, when we tune into that. The importance of staying connected to other people and, talking about our worries. I think that's really important that we do that if we can. And, staying active, staying healthy, eating healthily, having some kind of structure. This came out last week quite strongly, I think, in the session, was the importance of, having some structure and routine to our day as well. I think that's something that we can hopefully have some control over. So I think just for me, just to say, yeah, we need to be kind to ourselves, and just focus on those things that we do have some control over. So thank you. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everybody. And just to let everybody know that Prepster have created a hub, a COVID-19 hub on our page, which the link will be there. And there's information around a number of different areas and different communities around managing during the COVID-19 lockdown. So on that note, we're going to wrap up. Next week, Thursday at 3 o'clock, we will be back here doing the same thing, having a conversation around accessing community and clinical services. So when we opened up, one of the questions that came up immediately was around accessing clinical care. So can we get our viral load tests? Where do we get treatment, etc.? So we'll be looking at that next week. We've got some great speakers again. We'll be putting out the login details over the weekend. So look at the Prepster and THT social media. Thank you all once again. Thank you to Stefan, to Carla, and to Sophie for giving us your time, and for also doing work outside of this to prepare for today. Thank you, Dominic, for moderating for Jim and I once again. If you do want the resource list that we've pulled together, if you email me, Mark, that's my name, at hello@prepster.info, I will send the resource list out to you individually. Have a wonderful week. Take care of yourselves. Stay home and stay safe. And on behalf of Jim and myself, thank you very much. See you soon.